Hey everyone, welcome back to Audio Legend. Marantz, Pioneer, SX-1980, Sansui G series Macintosh prices have gone completely insane. Machines that used to cost a few hundred now sell for thousands. Collector tax is everywhere. But the best performance per dollar in 2026 isn't in those listings. It's hiding under names most people still walk right past. Today I'm showing you 5 vintage stereo bargains that still fly under the radar. Real power, real build, real sound, no hype tax. Subscribe, turn on notifications, let's get into it. MCS-3125, the JCPenney monster nobody believes. Yes, JCPenney, I know what you're thinking. Department store audio is usually the punchline, and for most of the MCS line, you'd be right. But the MCS-3125 is different. This was their top of the line flagship from the very late 1970s into the early 1980s, and it was built like a proper Japanese monster. Rated 125 watts per channel into 8 ohms. The manual quietly notes it can do more. Independent power supplies for each channel, huge power transformer, 2 large filter capacitors per side, direct coupled amplifier stage, serious heat sinks. The thing weighs around 70 pounds. One owner on ClassicReceivers.com said the build quality is equal to or better than a Pioneer SX-1250 or even an SX-1980. Another picked one up at Goodwill for $50, took it home, and was genuinely shocked by how hard it drove his speakers. The styling is pure late 70SXS. The MCS-3125 wears a full aluminum faceplate and matching knobs, then covers itself in light. 153 LEDs in total, a 5-band graphic equalizer with bright red indicators, plus both an analog dial and a digital frequency display running side by side. It looks a little flashy, a little boombox adjacent, which is exactly why so many serious collectors still walk past it. The MCS badge, JCPenney's house brand, does the rest of the damage. In a market that still worships Marantz and Sansui, the penny name simply does not carry weight. Yet the people who actually own them keep saying the same thing. On ClassicReceivers.com and Audio Karma, owners repeatedly note that the internal build matches or exceeds a Pioneer SX-1250 or even an SX-1980. Independent power supplies per channel, a massive transformer, oversized filter capacitors, and real heat sinking. One buyer found a clean example at Goodwill for $50, took it home, and was genuinely shocked by the power and control. Another longtime owner said he preferred its authoritative, clean sound to his own SX-1250. At roughly 70 pounds, it feels like a proper monster. And once the lights come on and the music starts, the flashy face suddenly makes sense. Branding and looks still keep prices lower than the performance deserves for now. But the people who actually plug one in and listen keep saying the same things. Powerful, clean, authoritative bass, and more than enough current to control difficult speakers. One longtime owner preferred it to his SX-1250. Another said it blew him out of the room in the best possible way. Current reality check. Because the name still repels a lot of buyers, clean working examples can still be found for noticeably less than equivalent power from the correct brands. Once word fully spreads, this one will stop being a bargain. Right now, it still is. If you see a heavy MCS-3125 with the big EQ section and it powers up cleanly, don't overthink the badge. Get it. Like the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you catch the next one. Fisher RS-1060 Point, the beautiful Sanyo era sleeper. I used to write off late 1970s Fisher receivers the same way a lot of people still do. The classic tube Fishers from the 1950s and early 60s, those are holy grail pieces. Anything after Emerson and then Sanyo took over the brand usually gets dismissed as lesser. I bought into that story for years until I actually spent time with an RS-1060. This thing was built between 1977 and 1979 and originally retailed for around $700. On paper, it puts out 125 watts per channel into 8 ohms at 0.1% THD. Frequency response is listed as 20 Hz to 20 kHz. The chassis measures 23 3/4 inches wide by 7 high by almost 17 inches deep and tips the scales at a back-breaking 54 pounds. that is not a polite mid-size receiver. It was designed to go head-to-head with the Sansui 9090 decibels, the Pioneer SX-1080 class, and the Marantz 2325. Whether it fully matches them is still debated, but more than a few people who have owned both sides of that comparison say the Fisher holds its own, and in some cases they prefer it. What first surprised me was the bass control section. Instead of a simple bass knob that boosts a wide range and quickly turns muddy, the RS-1060 gives you a bass selector that lets you choose either the 45 Hz range, the 80 Hz range, or neither. Then a separate bass range control sets how much boost you apply inside that narrower window. It is a small detail on paper, but in real rooms with real speakers, it makes a noticeable difference. You can add weight without filling the entire bottom end with sludge. Add in 3 pairs of speaker outputs, dual phono inputs, multiple filters, a 5-gang FM front end, and those signature red LEDs glowing in the volume knob and the tip of the tuning pointer, and the whole package starts to feel thoughtfully engineered rather than just another Power War box. The sound is where the RS-1060 really wins people over. Owners on Audio Karma and classic receivers keep describing it the same way. Unusually easy on the ears for a high-power solid-state design of that era. It has real dynamics and grip, yet it avoids the hardness a lot of 1970s solid-state can develop when pushed. One longtime owner flat out called it one of the finest receivers he had ever owned. Another Reddit user titled a post, "The most beautiful receiver I've ever had." Someone else quietly admitted to owning 3 of them and said he actually prefers the 1060 to the bigger 1080. That kind of quiet loyalty from people who have lived with these machines for years is hard to ignore. The reason it still flies under the radar is simple. The Fisher name in the late 70s does not carry the same romance as Marantz or Pioneer. Collectors chase the earlier tube models hard and mostly skip the Sanyo era solid-state pieces. As a result, clean RS-1060s have historically traded in a more reasonable range, often in the $700 to $900 neighborhood, than the Japanese equivalents they were built to fight. You get genuine power, serious mass, a more flexible tone control system than many rivals, and a presentation that a surprising number of experienced listeners find unusually refined. They are not common. Production numbers were lower than the big Japanese brands, so finding a clean, fully working example takes patience. But when one surfaces, it still does not command the full collector premium attached to the more fashionable names. For anyone willing to look past the badge and actually listen, the RS-1060 remains one of the smarter high-power sleepers left from that era. Subscribe if you want more of these under the radar, finds new videos every week. Onkyo TX-8500. TX-8500 MKII overbuilt muscle without the tax. Most people chasing late 1970s powerhouses never put Onkyo at the top of their list. That is exactly why the TX-8500 and its MKII sibling still represent one of the smarter values left in the monster receiver category. Onkyo arrived a little late to the big power party. By the time their top-of-the-line TX-8500 appeared, Pioneer and Marantz already owned the conversation. That timing cost them the romantic brand story and the long-term collector heat. But it did not stop their engineers from building something seriously overbuilt. The original TX-8500 is rated 110 watts continuous into 8 ohms and 150 watts into 4 ohms. The later MKII version is frequently quoted by owners and sellers at 160 watts continuous. Both versions share the same physical presence, roughly 22.5 inches wide, little over 6 inches tall, and 18 inches deep, tipping the scale at around 55 pounds. Inside you find oversized transformers. Some examples even use dual transformers and heat sinks that look more serious than the competition from the same years. What stands out when you talk to long-term owners is reliability. One person who has run his TX-8500 for more than 40 years said the only work it ever needed was a thorough cleaning of the controls. In that same period, 4 of his other vintage receivers required major repairs. That kind of longevity is not accidental. The internal layout is clean, the power supply is robust, and the overall construction was considered extreme even by the generous standards of 1976, 1979. The sound matches the hardware. These receivers deliver authority and grip without turning shouty or hard. The presentation stays clean and powerful, with enough current to control inefficient or demanding speakers. One owner reported that a friend who was used to a Sansui G7700 walked away more impressed by the Onkyo. Another has been driving a pair of Klipschorns with his TX-8500 for decades and still considers it the best sounding amplifier in the house. Recent owners on Reddit and Audio Karma keep echoing the same themes. Dual transformers, a smooth yet powerful character, and a sense that the machine was built to last rather than just to win a brochure war. Because Onkyo never cultivated the same mythology as Marantz or the same marketing volume as Pioneer in the American market, demand has stayed lower. Clean original TX-8500S have long been available in the mid-hundreds when they surface. Nice MKII examples have climbed in recent years, yet they still often represent better performance per dollar than equivalent power from the more fashionable names. The entire TX series from this era, including the 4500 and 6500, tends to fly under the radar for the same reason the larger models are simply rarer and less talked about. If your goal is serious, continuous power, genuine overbuilding, and a clean, authoritative presentation without paying the full Pioneer Marantz premium, the TX-8500 and MKII remain two of the more intelligent places to look. They do not have the instant visual recognition or the collector chatter of the usual suspects, but the people who actually live with them tend to keep them. 4. Toshiba SA-7100, the flip panel warm powerhouse. Most people hunting vintage receivers in 2026 still walk right past the Toshiba name. They scan the usual suspects, Marantz, Blue Faces, Pioneer SX Monsters, Sansui G Series, and barely glance at anything carrying a Toshiba badge. That habit is costing them one of the more quietly impressive late 1970s Japanese receivers still available at a relative bargain. The SA-7100 was produced roughly between 1978 and 1980. On paper, it delivers a solid 110 watts per channel into 8 ohms across 15 hertzes to 20 kilohertzes at under 0.08% total harmonic distortion and a healthy 140 watts into 4 ohms. Those numbers put it firmly in the upper mid-pack of the Power War era, yet it never received the marketing push or collector mythology of its more famous rivals. Original retail hovered around the mid to high $600 range. Serious money at the time. And the chassis still feels substantial today at roughly 19.5 to 20 kilograms, or about 43 pounds. Dimensions sit in the neighborhood of 500 and 2550 millimeters wide by 190 millimeters high by 460 millimeters deep, so it occupies real estate on a shelf the way a proper high-power receiver should. What first catches the eye is the distinctive flip-down front panel. A brushed aluminum cover hides the tone controls, high and low filters, and balance. Press it, and the panel swings open with a smooth, almost automotive spring action that one owner compared to an SUV tailgate. Close it again, and the face returns to a clean, uncluttered look that still feels premium nearly 50 years later. Wood side panels and that solid aluminum front complete a design that manages to look both restrained and luxurious at the same time. But the real story is what happens when you feed it music. Owners who've lived with the SA-7100 keep returning to the same descriptions: full, warm, powerful, with excellent bass authority and a relaxed, non-fatiguing top end. It does not sound aggressive or clinical. Instead, it delivers a sense of weight and control even at moderate volume levels. Speakers stay composed. The presentation has body without becoming muddy. One longtime owner who paid $400 for a clean example said it easily drove everything from Magnepan and quad electrostatics to larger Sonus Faber floor standers and never felt underpowered. Another simply called it shockingly good and noted it outperformed a Technics receiver he already owned. A third described it as a refined beast, capable of serious dynamics yet remaining easy to listen to for hours. That combination of real current capability and a warmer musical character is exactly why the SA-7100 still rewards people willing to look past the badge. The flip panel design, while clever and satisfying, never became an iconic visual cue the way a Marantz Blue dial did. Toshiba itself never cultivated the same cult following among American collectors that Sansui or Pioneer enjoyed. As a result, clean working examples have historically traded for noticeably less money than comparable power and build quality from the more fashionable names. If you prefer a slightly warmer, more organic presentation with genuine grip on the speakers, and you are willing to ignore the name on the faceplate, the Toshiba SA-7100 remains one of the better kept secrets of the late 1970s Japanese receiver boom. It is not the rarest or the most celebrated, but it is one of the more consistently satisfying machines you can still find without paying the full collector premium. Realistic STA-2200, Radio Shack's MOSFET secret. Last one, and this is the sleeper that still shocks people the hardest. Almost every serious collector writes off Realistic the moment they see the name. Most of the time they're right. A lot of Radio Shack gear from that era was average at best. The STA-2200 is the clear exception, and the reason is sitting right in the power amp section. On paper, it looks modest. 60 watts per channel into 8 ohms at an impressively low 0.02% THD with a frequency response of 15 Hz to 25 kHz. What the brochure doesn't scream is that the output stage uses high-quality Hitachi MOSFET transistors, automatic protection against surges, overloads, shorts, and overheating, and some of the largest heat sinks you'll find on any receiver in this power class. One owner on ClassicReceivers.com called them the beefiest heat sinks he had ever seen on a 60 watt machine. The main transformer is also surprisingly large for the rating, and the whole chassis feels solid and heavier than you expect, mid 30 S-pounds and quite substantial in size. That hardware translates directly into the sound. Longtime owners are often the most enthusiastic. On Audio Karma, one member flat out said it was perhaps the best I've heard among any Realistic receiver and described it as a little beast that punches well above its 60 watt rating. Others repeatedly mention a warm, musical character that comes from those MOSFET outputs, smooth, controlled, and capable of driving less efficient speakers without strain or hardness. Several people who have measured these units noted they can deliver more than the rated 60 watts cleanly, with one report showing low distortion even when pushed higher. The tuner is also better than average for the brand, and the overall execution sits far above typical Realistic quality of the period. Because it carries the Realistic badge and only claims 60 watts on paper, almost nobody is specifically hunting these. That keeps prices reasonable relative to what you actually get. A well-executed MOSFET amplifier with serious protection, good current delivery, and a surprisingly refined presentation in a package most collectors still walk past without a second look. You're building a system on a real budget and want something that sounds better than the badge and the paper specs suggest? The STA-2200 remains one of the genuine secrets still floating around. It doesn't have the prestige or the power war numbers of the big Japanese monsters, but the people who have lived with one for years tend to keep it, and that tells you everything. How to actually find and buy these in 2026. A few practical notes from years of watching this market. Service history matters more than cosmetics. These are 40 to 50-year-old electronics. Capacitors dry out, switches oxidize, and relays get dirty. A clean faceplate with unknown internals is often a more expensive project than a slightly scuffed unit that has already been properly restored by someone who knows what they're doing. Weight is your friend. All 5 of these are heavy for a reason. If a listing feels suspiciously light, walk away. Listen before you fall in love with the story. Brand mythology is powerful. Actual sound in your room with your speakers is what matters. Local pickup still beats shipping on heavy receivers whenever possible. These things are dense, and the shipping cost plus risk of damage adds up fast. And finally, the window is still open, but it won't stay open forever. Every time a well-made video or forum thread highlights one of these, a few more people start watching for them. The MCS 3125 and Fisher RS 1060 inches particular feel like they're right on the edge of broader recognition. The vintage stereo market has gotten expensive and crowded at the top. That creates opportunity lower down for people who are willing to ignore the badges and actually listen. These 5, the MCS 3125, Fisher RS 1060, Onkyo TX-8500 series, Toshiba SA-7100, and Realistic STA-2200 still deliver serious performance without the full collector premium. They are not perfect. They all benefit from a proper service. Some have quirks, but if your goal is music in the room rather than bragging rights on a forum, they remain some of the smartest money you can spend in vintage hi-fi right now. If you've owned any of these or have a different sleeper you think belongs on this list, drop it in the comments. I read them. And if you found this useful, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more deep dives into the bargains the rest of the market is still sleeping on. Thanks for watching. Now go find something heavy that doesn't have a famous name on it. Your ears will thank you. Audio legend,